Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
I was at that
how do you
time.
feel about that?
Well, I think we should tell people what happened just in case they didn't catch all the Twitter drama. Sky, do you want to kind of give a summary of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it just started off, I feel like, with your tweet, Bree. Like, you put that out there, and it was just like an original post about us talking about our hair and how that's like a variation of women. And it was pretty benign, although it was kind of playing onto the stereotype. And of course, that was strategic, right? Like, it was intentionally that way because we knew that it would get a reaction. And sure enough, but I'll admit, I did not think it was going to go as far as it did. But J.K. Rowling reposts it, a screenshot of it, and it says, "Never forget, gender identity isn't about sex stereotypes, but playing around with your hair proves you're not a man." Playing sarcasm on this whole, element on basically just the stereotype definition and saying, like, doesn't make you a woman.
Right.
And trying to be super, pinpoint on that. And so,
which is true. I mean, that's true to an extent.
Yeah.
But it also feels like you can't win, I mean, like, even as we're speaking, a top turf is going after like old pictures of me before FFS and going like, we know what a woman looks like. So it's like, how am I supposed to win? Like, if I take hair and eyebrows and face shape and makeup and all this stuff really seriously, I get criticized for having conversations about that stuff with you guys. If I don't, then that also means I'm not a woman. So, I think what I was trying to say isn't so much like you, yourself, any person out there needs to make these choices to be a woman, but rather, like, if you listen to the show, the way we interact with each other is like, it's just very natural. And I think like we have the kind of relationships a lot of women have with each other. And I think that shines through to the point I would like ask people to look at this and say, do you really think any of us would be happy if you forced us to be men with public policy? Like, this is just authentically who we are. And that's the point I was trying to get across.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's a reading of your tweet, which is not really that like talking about hair makes you a woman, but talking about hair is just like a very universal thing that lots of people speak about. And it's very like normal to do and is indicative of the fact that trans women, like anyone else, have sort of mundane life things that they deal with, which are just like, there's a commonality between people. And it's not even like a woman thing necessarily. Lots of guys, especially like, I've been watching Queer Eye with my girlfriend, and like Jonathan Van Ness has like this like gorgeous mane of hair, which obviously takes a lot of time to like take care of. Yeah. Very sweet person. And I think that like you could easily look at, Jonathan talking about hair and be like, oh, look at this. Like, not a weird sex pervert, just like a normal person who has these sort of normal concerns. And so that's how I interpreted your tweet. But I do think that like, I mean, obviously perfs are just, you can't win by appealing to them because like you're saying, like, if you try to mention like, oh, we have this common humanity and caring about our hair or whatever, then you're saying that like, that's what makes you a woman. And like, this is what you're basing identity off of. Like, how shallow and ridiculous and stereotypical of you. But then, if you don't look sufficiently feminine, then they weaponize that against you as well. And they would never weaponize that against, a cis woman. So it's just people play dirty and are willing to say whatever it is in order to, embarrass you or attack you.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like it kind of comes down to how, like, what womanhood means to a trans woman. And it's like, because we are male, we're biologically male, right? It's like there's a societal recognition of womanhood that often depends on those stereotypes to a degree. I mean, like, they're stereotypes for a reason, and it's because they're associated with females. And, I think as trans women, we sort of, are looking to align ourselves with those cultural markers to an extent. And for many of us, it's natural already. Like we were saying, we were having that conversation about hair and it was so easy. And I feel like that could just easily mirror a cis woman's conversation. But we understand too that part of our recognition as women comes with those stereotypes and conformity, more or less, And so it's like, it's fun for us to accent that and to show that and to just, reveal that about ourselves and talk about that. And it makes it, and this is why I think there was such a visceral reaction, is that it tempts people to more easily be like, oh yeah, they go in the woman category. And, they just can't have that. They just cannot have that.
Yeah.
That's like what it comes down to.
I think if the four of us were having lunch in real life, most people would just walk past the table and not think a thing, right? I genuinely believe that. And I don't know. It really feels, like you said, you can't win. Kelly, did you want to say something? Because I was going to talk about one of Rowling's tweets in a second.
I mean, in a world where gender and sex are two different things, gender is just completely based off stereotypes. And I feel like the trans community has always kind of admitted that. I mean, I don't know why they act like it's some gotcha. Like, oh, see, you're talking about doing your hair. Like, that just means you're not really a woman. It's like, no, everything you've been taught about being a woman, outside of sex, is a stereotype. That's exactly, at least what I've been taught, is what gender is. I think the craziest part of the whole situation is just the fact that J.K. Rowling, of all people, took the bait. Because I do think your tweet, to a degree, was obviously, like you said, trying to cause a reaction. But you would think someone as big as J.K. Rowling would at least, who's been in the game for so long now, you think she would know how to not, fall into a trap like that. And she just gave us crazy promotion for you just doing a really basic tweet. So yeah. I just think it's pretty crazy in general that it even happened.
Well, I want to respectfully push back just a little bit. Something I've noticed, particularly for women in their 40s and after they have children, is I think for us, because we can't have children, we don't menstruate and do things like that, I think it's easy for us to forget that, there's a biological element to being a woman. And I think for a lot of TERFs who are parents, they felt their body change after childbirth. They think about maybe the fears of getting pregnant throughout their life, or these fears that are uniquely biological. And I do think that as women get older, that biological element is more important to them. Where I think my objection would be, it's not either or. I think all of us fully admit the biological aspect of that is important. I think most of us wish desperately we could experience that. It's just there is a social communicative effort to, or part of being a woman that is, it's hard to put your finger on, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah. But I think the problem, though, is that a lot of feminists, a lot of old school feminists like J.K. Rowling, they grew up in an environment where they were really trying to fight those expectations. And so the fight for so long has been to show that women don't have to engage in the behaviors you're talking about or care about their hair in order to be women. And so by, justifying one's womanhood based on those factors, you are really, going against their sort of political project. And I think that's a deep tension that we're hitting on here.
Yeah, for sure. I was just going to say it all comes down to, do you think there's any kind of definition based on stereotypes or no? And that's where like you just said, Taff, with the history of the women's rights movement and all of that, it's very bioessentialist, women are born, not made. I've seen that, or things like that. And it's well, why can't it be an expansive definition? Can't it be yes, you're born female, okay, yeah, you're a woman. That's fair. That, no one is saying even if you act very masculine, you're not a woman. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that there can be an overlapping definition here that brings in those that do sort of get associated with the stereotypes and are understood that way, particularly if they've modified their secondary sex characteristics, which is exactly what medical transition does. And so it's can the two definitions coexist? Or is there, like we just said, a natural tension that prevents that?
Yeah.
Never going to get
I'm very spicy.
Nope. Ever.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Taff?
Oh, I have very, I think, spicy opinions on this. I mean, I wrote quite a long essay about how, women or trans women should maybe be a little bit less concerned with, the label of woman itself. And in that essay, I discuss some of the problems with identifying womanhood with sex stereotypes. And ultimately, like, my conclusion in that essay is that, like, it really, definitions of womanhood that aren't biological fail in a lot of ways. Either they end up being sort of like exclusive, sex stereotyped, or they're just like totally vacuous. And I think that that is a really difficult problem to get over. And I think maybe my question is like, why does it matter so much if we are labeled as women? Because I think that if you're allowed, you have the rights as a human to, have ownership over your body, and to take the hormones you want, and to get the surgeries you want, and to present the way you want, and to be feminine. All of that is what really matters to me, much more than like the specific label you give it. And so to me, it seems like, I'm not super attached to the label of woman necessarily. And I've never quite understood the intense attachment to it.
Go ahead, Kelly, please.
Well, no, I was just saying it's tough because like, I get what you're saying, like to a degree. It's like, what does the label like really matter at the end of the day? But I just like, you don't like get like the feeling of like it wouldn't bother you to call yourself like a man, I guess is what you're saying. Like at the end of the day, if you could like live your life the same exact way, being called a man wouldn't bother you. Cause I feel like it would really bother me.
Yeah. Why would it bother you though?
See, and that's where it's kind of like tough. Cause I guess I've like never really thought about it. I guess it just like validates my identity and the experience I think I go through as a trans woman or just as someone living with dysphoria in general. So do you not feel that at all? Like it just, there's no pushback.
Well, here's what I think is going on is that when we navigate the world day to day, we use these sex stereotypes, whether someone's masculine or feminine, like a female or like a man, to categorize people. And so we sort of put people in these categories of like feminine, woman, right? And we label people that way. And I think that when we call ourselves like a man or a woman, we are communicating on one level something about the kind of stereotypes that we're fitting into, because that's practically how we tend to use the terms. And I think that like what I would chafe against is being labeled as like masculine. Like I wouldn't want to be labeled as masculine because I'd prefer to be seen as feminine. So I think when some people like call you a man, it feels like they're saying you're masculine. Now, I think what's interesting is that in this conversation, we're all quite comfortable with saying that we are male, right? No one here is disagreeing with that because we accept that like males can actually be very, very feminine and can present in like a feminine kind of, in a very feminine way. And so I think that if you use a definition of male that is equated totally with man, then I think I would feel exactly about the term man as I feel about male, right?
Sure.
And I think it's only because we sort of are actually using man and woman to refer to feminine person or masculine person, maybe erroneously, that we have this internal resistance. So to your question, I think in the world where we use man and woman just to refer to biological sex, it would not bother me at all in the way that I'm not really bothered by being called male. But in the world where we use these words sort of ambiguously, it might frustrate me a little to be called a man because I might feel like I'm being called masculine. So
I hear. Go ahead.
Well, sorry. So would being called a feminine man not bother you then in the real world?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Because that would
bother me.
I empathize with Taff on this because like I feel like I'm like a ping pong ball on this whole categorization thing because it all comes back to what Taff just said, which is like, do you think male or do you think man equals masculine and woman equals feminine? And because in the social categorization of our brains, that is sort of what's going on. When we're reading things and reading people. Right? Yeah. But in a literalist sense, like, no, like it's not true. Like I've seen some, like Jonathan Van Ness, great example of ultra feminine men that are just like, just beautiful souls and lovely. And, I think that's why, like, I guess, feminine man wouldn't offend me.
I have to push back on this. Like, I do. I'm sorry. I got to push back a little bit. Like, okay, so this is my opinion on this. I know she's saying I'm a biological male, but, at the same time, like, I transitioned. And if people don't know me, if I'm going throughout my life, I get called she, her, just naturally. It is the way I look. It's the way people assume me to be. That just happens. And I love, there's a Short Matter Taku video where he talks about, like, if you have to say you're the thing, you're not the thing. And I think, like, ultimately the best indicator that you are the thing is the way people treat you as you go through life. I think there's a political project by J.K. Rowling and her TERF friends to call us men. And I don't think it's about biology. I think it is to dehumanize us. And I think it is tapped into this deep British class system that they are still like wrestling with today. And it's just to put us in our place. So, and the thing is, as I go about my life, like my chromosomes are not the most relevant part of like my life. And, if you're putting me in a situation where people are outing me constantly, like there's a certain cost that is associated with that in terms of discrimination or how I'm treated. It's why, like, it was a lot easier for me before I talked about being out publicly. Right? My life was exponentially better. In fact, I would recommend most people like transition, go stealth, don't talk about it. That is the best course of action. So I have no problem admitting the biological reality. It's that their intention here, they're not my doctor. Like the intention is to dehumanize us.
So why does it feel, do you think, dehumanizing to be called a man?
Well, I think the gender dysphoria is, I wanted to be something and it hurt a lot to not be that thing. I understand I can't wave a magic wand and make myself menstruate, but, I can get as close to that as I can. And, I think, I'm legally a female. I have breasts. I have a vagina. I'm married to a man. I think I'm as close as we can get with this technology today. And I think it's just about respect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess there's one thing, which is maybe it's like inaccurate to call you a man on some level, right? Yeah. Which is, I think what I'm hearing from you again and again is that you're saying it's accurate to call you male, right? But inaccurate to call you a man, which means that there must be some difference in how these words are being defined. Yeah. And I would just say that, like, in the world where we define these things the same, I have no problem with being called a man. I think in the world where we define man based on stereotypes, I think it's just inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
And so if we go with like a stereotype definition of man, which again, I don't necessarily think we should. I all for sort of like deconstructing these stereotypes and allowing people to live how they want. But if someone uses man with the stereotypical definition of mind, I would just say it's inaccurate to me. And, I would dislike it for that reason. But I think that insofar as TERFs are like serious about equating these two things, it doesn't bother me to be called a man.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the volume,
giving them too much credit, though. Like,
but I think you don't get this at the volume I do, Taff. Like, it is just the amount of abuse I got from J.K. Rowling after this was just astronomical. And again, their mission is not some academic discussion of biology. It is a vengeful, rage-filled mission to dehumanize us. And this takes me to, I wanted to talk about J.K. Rowling's tweet that she put out just a few days ago. So y'all, like, please remember, J.K. Rowling originally started, like, her defenders love to quote this, like, she's not transphobic. She just says, dress as you please, dress, however you want. Here's a tweet that she put out a few days ago, and we'll put it on screen here so people can read it as we edit this segment. But in this, she's changed this a bit. She's updated it. And she's no longer saying dress as you please. She now says dress as you please in private. And in public, we have the right to push back on this because children shouldn't see fetishes. And, some people want to be serial killers. And we don't affirm that wish. And that's why we need to start pushing back on the trans community. This is flat out eliminationist talk. She's not making an argument about biology anymore. She's talking about pushing us out of public life. And that is a truly extremist trans eliminationist point of view.
Yeah. That's insane. I didn't know about that.
I think this is where TERFs really start losing people because it's just, the idea that you would strictly regulate people's gender presentation is something that like most people just see on its face as totally absurd. Yeah, not something you could even like practically do. And if you did do it, you would end up reinforcing the exact sex stereotypes
right.
that Rowling really dislikes. So it would be totally.
At some point, this is just the same mirror. Like I am against using birthing person because I think it's dehumanizing to refer to women as though they're just walking uteruses. That's deeply dehumanizing to me. And Rowling's argument is really just basing women on their body parts, which just seems so crude, in my opinion.
Well, that's how the TERFs have always been. It's always been what you were born with between your legs is what you are, and there's no anything in between with them.
Yeah.
The whole birthing person thing. I go back and forth on the topic because I understand that like most people in the community that use that term are not like putting it towards cis women. They're just using it towards trans men that happen to get pregnant. And while I understand that perspective, it's hard for me to even understand a trans man like wanting to go through a pregnancy in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird topic to me all around. Because then every time I get to that point, it's like any trans man that's willing to carry a pregnancy, it's like, I'm sorry, are they even really trans at that point?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Sky. Like you're looking at having a child with your partner, so that's gotta be weird for you. That's gotta bring up some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it has me thinking about, what's my role like when it comes to raising my kids. I don't have to go through like the whole experience of what a female would have to go through being pregnant and all of that, because that's way more involved, like from a biological perspective. But I guess like, I have thought about like, because technically my kids will have two moms, what that would look like and what they'll call me, how they'll differentiate us, etc. I'm not too worried about it. Like, I'm just kind of like, figure it out on the go. But I mean, that's the only way to have kids in this scenario anyway. So I'm just kind of like, well, biology does matter to an extent, but part of being trans is transcending that too.
So people get bothered, by different things. So like, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
And to some extent, like if you are just bothered, by being called a man or being called male, and that's just like the end of the story for you, I think that's like also like a legitimate answer to just be like, well, I'm just like, I don't like it personally. Now, yeah, I think that like that's totally fine to say, and you can have your own sort of personal boundaries with people. And I think that that's totally respectable to be like, if you're going to be my friend, I want you to call me a woman, right? Yeah. And I want to agree on this shared use of language that when we use woman, we mean like someone that includes the kind of person that I am. So I think that that's like okay at the end of the day.
I mean, if we are trying to, all of us here, I think it's important that as we're talking to our women friends, we respect them, which is why we would never say birthing person. Or if someone tells me that cis bothers them, I don't get it, but I'll say biological woman instead. It's just respect. And I think that same respect is, I don't consider it like, Kelly, the thing you said a long time ago, you can't even remember being a man at this point. I feel the same way. It's like a dream. It's like a version of myself that's so long ago, I can't even remember it. I know Cenk is about to get here, so I wanted to talk about this part of it before he does. How did we feel about the way the trans community responded to this? Because I really thought there was a lot of bad faith there. When Rowling attacked me, I wrote something that you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was very cordial and open and measured, sending back to her, trying to open up the door and have a conversation. And I got probably 500 or 600 tweets saying, "Welcome to the leopards eating your face party, Brianna." Haha, look at this happening. And it's like, does the trans community not understand, like, there's a story out there about trans women just like, what do you expect me to do? Scream, call her names, send the same death threats the trans community has been doing? Like, we started the show for dialogue and being reasonable. And I don't know why people are so stunned. That was my reaction back. Like, am I just losing my mind here?
No. People have a weird reaction to centralism when extremism is leading like both sides. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
I think there's this viewpoint that any degree of compromise or dialogue means you're forfeiting your position, or like you're forfeiting your own, like the direction that we all want this identity group wants things to go. And the fact is that that's one, not true. And two, it's like, how are you ever supposed to get people, because the world is not comprised of just your identity group. How are you supposed to get people in other groups to understand and buy into the mission that you have for your group? And it's like through dialogue, through open conversation, and through understanding each other's viewpoints and building bridges. And this is why, like, look, for all the things they'll say about, oh, you're just being a pick-me and the leopards eating your faces comments, like, I have so much I could say, but it would just be like, look, your tactics have not been working. Yeah. They have not been working. They're going like trans rights is down. Everything is down. Like when it comes to LGBT rights, like
we're down bad.
Like, why do you think we're out here on a platform now? And I mean, I was living comfortably, just like you, Brie, not in the closet, but like, stealth, not making a big deal, talking about trans stuff. And then, having to kind of sacrifice that big time for the sake of just showing what real trans integration and visibility should look like. And it's sad that it can't be received better. But I think it's also a bell curve. And I think it gets worse right now, but as things improve, hopefully that perception will improve too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tragic. I mean, it hurts more, I think, when progressives and like trans positive people are sort of like down on you. Because like, if a gender critical or turfy person is like hating on me, it's very easy to just like brush it off and be like, whatever. I think it hurts a lot when people who you perceive as being like on your side and really advocating for are like engaging in what I think are quite frankly like destructive ways. And, they're killing any attempt at sort of mutual understanding or bridge building. I think that's really frustrating. I've had this experience telling people over and over the past years, like, listen, the way that we're talking about adolescent transition is like not working. And we need to, change how we do this and get real honest about what the data says. And I've, just been shouted out of like every room because of that. And now like every, all these European countries and even America are like reconsidering adolescent transition. And it's like, I feel like I've been trying so hard to like tell people that this is coming, and people have just ignored me every time and doubled down on this language, which is not helping the problem. So yeah, I think it's really sad and frustrating.
Oh,
I think we're going to win. Listen, I think with the J.K. Rowling thing, like, if thousands of TERFs are mad, gender critical people are in your mentions, harassing you and whatnot, I think if there's 100 people who actually check out Dollcast and like listen, and they're like, oh, actually, you know what? Her opinions are like pretty reasonable. And, someone brings you on a show like Piers Morgan or whatever it is, and they're like, you know what? What's all the big deal? Like, why are you being attacked by J.K. Rowling? And then you state like in simple terms, like, listen, I'm just like anyone else. You know, I care about things like hair. I care about my rights to care about those things, and that's what matters to me. That's a message that resonates with people, and I think that, you know, a little bit of internet drama is, you know, it's just, we're going to win in the end. It's going to help.
I agree we're going to win. I do want to ask you not to underestimate like the amount of personal toll some of this stuff takes on me. Like, I've been around the internet for a while and I'm used to death threats and rape threats. Like, if you guys look at the text message chain the night after this happened, you're getting text messages at 4 a.m. that are, hey, I stayed up all night working on A, B, C, and D. And it's because I could not sleep because like every piece of social media I had was on fire. Nut jobs are emailing me. I'm having to take down comments on our YouTube channel because it is just so over the line. And like, to a certain extent, I signed up for this. I'm a public figure. I understand that, but it's just, it really, like, there are real times now that I swear to God, before I started on this political project, just going through my day, I just thought of myself as a woman. I just literally did not think of it. And you can only have someone call you a man so many hundreds of times a day and not have it like affect you on some level. And, you know, like it's, I wish that asking for my own dignity did not come at such a high cost, if that makes sense to you.
No, I mean, it's a horrifically high cost. It's, you know, maybe one of those brutal things that someone can go through, short of, you know, like actually, you know, going to war, but just, you know, you feel constantly attacked. You're in like a constant state of danger and panic. And that's, you know, why you end up staying up to 4 a.m. because your body was like pumping with adrenaline, because in a very real sense, you recognize that like, you know, what people think is life or death. And, you know, I think that is so hard. I think that hopefully it helps to just like know that all of the hate online is kind of like an illusion, and that there's like there's real people like Cenk who, you know, who care and are willing to listen to you. And the people who are sort of, they're insane online, those people are like the least meaningful group of people to care about their opinions. And so I think it's nice to just know that like when it comes to people who actually matter, those people think through things and are not so crazy.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I just think about like who we're hoping to bring on Dollcast this next year. Like, Bree, you've been like, you know, back channeling and doing all the things you do best. And honestly, like, I feel like this is the cost of being visible, is that you're gonna attract haters. And I always come back to that. If you're attracting them, then it's because you stand for something. And if you stand for something, it means that they think you're a threat. They think you're a threat to something. I don't know what, but I guess just to making trans people acceptable in society again. So
I think the TERFs are so focused on me and our political project because we're effective, right?
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling got a ton of power by basically just broadcasting, frankly, the death threats that trans people have been sending her. It's abhorrent. It doesn't work. It made us look unhinged. And, you know, Vosh is my friend. But when he's posting stuff like shut up and make me a sandwich, it just makes the pro-trans side looks insane. But on the other hand, now she's doing this to the Gamergate chick. Like, come on. I will sit there and let y'all say the worst stuff to me, and people can just read it online, and they have. And, you know, we got so many messages this week talking about how horrible what the backlash was. And I think they're focused on attacking us because we are showing that this is a two-way street of dehumanization. Right? Trans people have been beyond inappropriate to J.K. Rowling. And we denounce that. Like, everyone on the show denounces that. But there's a mirror project on their side to deny us our humanity, to humiliate us, and to ultimately push us out of public life. Maya Forrester this week was pushing back on the idea of adults having gender change surgery like downstairs, like pushing back on it and intimating that we needed to outlaw it. This is a crazy fringe mission. And I think if we are reasonable in the middle, I do think it really exposes just what the ultimate goal of this mission is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think so.
Totally agree. Yeah.
We got to hold on to that, like those fundamental values, because there's lots of trans people that are like going to attack us. And of course there's going to be like gender critical people who attack us. But my values are solid. Like I believe in people's agency over their own bodies fundamentally. And it doesn't matter like if every single person in the world were to tell me like I'm wrong on that and that like they hate that I believe that. It doesn't matter. Like I believe that anyways. And so like fuck all those people. Like yeah, I'm just going to keep on my principles. You know, we had an interview with Cenk as well. Just like, you know, he does, because that is what I think shines through everything else more than anything, is keeping to what you believe in, really truly believing it, and not giving ground to anyone just, you know, for the sake of being liked or whatever. So
how about love for the trans community, Taff? You said that on our very first show. You said it on our third show. The India Willoughby segment, I relooked at that this week after J.K. Rowling attacked us, and you gave a really lovely monologue about how you didn't want to be a pick-me and you wanted to start this show to love the trans community. I think that's why it hurts so much when they attack us, because I feel, from my point of view, I'm out here tanking for the team and doing some stuff that's really unpleasant. And I'm doing it because I genuinely am worried that people that need healthcare I don't even need anymore are not going to have access to it. And I don't know. Like, I understand criticism is part of the job, but it just hurts how many people like assume poor intent here. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorite like archetypes in fiction is the character who is like noble and they're like hated for it. That like, resonates with me so much. You know, these people who are just doing the best they can do and they're punished, or someone like Ned Stark or like Dalinar Kholin, like in fantasy. These characters, they really work for me because they're shouldering this burden. And I feel like that is the height of nobility, because it's easy to be pro-trans when you're not being attacked for it.
Yeah.
And it's easy to be moderate on trans things when you're not being attacked for it. There's no virtue in playing to what people want you to say. The virtue of standing by your principles, true courage, it only occurs when you can stand against the hate. So I think what I see in you is virtue and courage. And it's so much bigger than anyone who is, you know, playing pick me. Even if you get like accused of that, like it couldn't be more far from the truth. So I think it's admirable what you're doing. And I think other people are going to see that more and more.
Y'all being on the show with me. Like, I mean, we're all doing this together. And it's why it makes it so much harder to attack any of us, because it's not just me, it's all four of us pushing for something. And Cenk sees the value. You heard what he says. He believes in our mission. And I think a lot of other people are going to see that too.
There's so many people that just aren't online that otherwise agree and need the voice that you're bringing. And this is where, like, I mean, I kind of see myself in this space, even though I'm here on the show and I love this show and I'm with it with you all. I'm not super online. And I like to think that I am sort of a representation of so many like non-online people that otherwise would be drawn in and totally on board with the mission of what we're here to say, which is just a third way for a really marginalized group of people that have sort of had their voice stolen from them quite a bit in the last like 5 to 10 years, and need to see like what is the proper vision for trans rights in modern society.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that we're at least much closer to that than some of the voices that have been sort of dominating the online space.
God knows, I agree.
And hopefully we can change some of the TERFs opinions too. I mean, I know like that doesn't seem possible half the time, but with some consistent watching, because they're watching us clearly by the replies, hopefully we can at least change a few of their opinions as well.
We've had those comments, Kelly. I've had TERFs write into the show and tell me, I don't think you're the threat. It's this wider mission I have a problem with. So I think they're acknowledging that. So maybe it'll be helpful.